I accused my mom of stealing from me, and it destroyed our family. Please listen to my story and tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my mother. My name is Sarah, and I was born in Portland, Oregon. I grew up in a small house on the east side of town with my parents and my younger sister Emma. Mom worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and Dad ran a small accounting firm from home. We weren't rich, but we had everything we needed. Mom was the kind of person who put everyone else first. She worked long shifts, came home tired, and still made sure we had home-cooked meals and help with our homework. When I turned 16, I got my first job at a coffee shop downtown. I was so proud to earn my own money. I started saving every penny I could. I had big dreams of buying a car when I turned 18. I kept my money in a small lockbox under my bed. It wasn't much, but watching that pile of cash grow made me feel like an adult. Every week, I would count it and write down the total in a little notebook. I was obsessed with tracking every dollar. My sister Emma was 14 at the time. She was going through a difficult phase. She wanted expensive clothes and the latest phone, but Mom and Dad said she had to wait. Emma would throw fits about it. She would slam doors and yell that all her friends had better things than her. Mom tried to be patient with her, but I could see the stress on her face. Dad would just shake his head and go back to his office. Things at home started feeling tense. Emma and I fought more than usual. She would borrow my clothes without asking and never return them. One time, I found my favorite jacket crumpled up in her closet with a stain on it. When I confronted her, she just shrugged and said it was an accident. I was furious. I started locking my bedroom door whenever I left the house. One Saturday morning in March, I woke up early for my shift at the coffee shop. I went to my lockbox to grab some cash for lunch. When I opened it, my heart stopped. The money looked different. There was less of it. I dumped everything out on my bed and counted it 3 times. I was missing $200. I checked my notebook. The numbers didn't match. Someone had taken my money. I felt sick to my stomach. I locked my door every time I left. The only people who had access to my room were my family. I sat on my bed trying to figure out who could have done this. Emma was the obvious suspect. She had been complaining about money for weeks, but when I asked her about it, she swore she hadn't touched my lockbox. She looked me straight in the eye and said she would never steal from me. I wanted to believe her, but I wasn't sure. Then I started noticing other strange things. Small amounts of cash would go missing from my purse. A $20 bill I was sure I had would just disappear. At first I thought I was miscounting or spending more than I remembered, but it kept happening. I became paranoid. I started marking my bills with a tiny dot in the corner so I could track them. I felt like a detective in my own home. One afternoon, I came home from school early. I had a half day because of teacher meetings. When I walked into the house, I saw Mom in the hallway outside my room. She looked startled to see me. She said she was just putting away some laundry. But my door was open, and I always locked it. My heart started racing. I asked her if she had been in my room. She said yes, just to drop off clean clothes. But something felt wrong. Her voice was different. She wouldn't quite look at me. I went into my room and checked my lockbox immediately. Another $50 was gone. I felt betrayed and confused. Why would Mom take my money? She had a good job. Dad made decent money. We weren't struggling financially. It didn't make any sense. But the evidence was right there in front of me. The money was gone, and Mom had been in my room. I didn't say anything that day. I wanted to be sure before I accused anyone. I set up a test. I counted every dollar in my lockbox and wrote down all the serial numbers. I even took a picture of the cash spread out on my bed. Then I locked everything up and left for work. I told Mom I would be gone until 9 that evening. I wanted to see if anything would go missing. When I got home that night, I rushed to my room. I locked the door behind me and opened the lockbox with shaking hands. My worst fear was confirmed. 3 more $20 bills were gone. $60 had vanished while I was at work. I checked the serial numbers against my list. The missing bills were the exact ones I had photographed. Someone had taken them, and based on what I had seen, it had to be Mom. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about all the times Mom had seemed stressed about money lately. She had mentioned that the hospital was cutting hours for some nurses. Maybe she was struggling more than she let on. Maybe she was too proud to ask Dad for help. But stealing from her own daughter? That seemed so unlike the Mom I knew, yet the evidence kept piling up. The next day at school, I couldn't focus. I kept replaying everything in my mind. My friend Jessica noticed I was upset and asked what was wrong. I told her everything. She was shocked. She said I needed to confront my mom right away. She said that if I didn't stop it now, Mom would just keep taking more money. Jessica made it sound so simple, but the idea of accusing my own mother of being a thief made me feel ill. Over the next week, I watched Mom like a hawk. I noticed she seemed tired all the time. She was working extra shifts at the hospital. She would come home late and go straight to bed. Dad seemed worried about her, but when he asked if she was okay, she would just smile and say she was fine. Emma was still being moody and difficult, but that was nothing new. The whole house felt heavy with secrets. I decided to keep better track of my money. I moved the lockbox to a new hiding spot in my closet. I buried it under a pile of old stuffed animals I never touched. I thought maybe if it was harder to find, the thief would give up. But 2 days later, another $40 was missing. Whoever was taking my money had found the new hiding spot. I felt violated. My room was supposed to be my safe space, and someone was invading it. That night at dinner, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I looked at Mom across the table and felt a wave of anger and sadness. She was eating her food quietly, looking exhausted. Dad was talking about a new client at his firm. Emma was texting under the table, even though that was against the rules. Everything looked normal, but I knew it wasn't. I knew someone at this table was a liar. After dinner, I followed Mom to the kitchen. She was loading the dishwasher. I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding so hard I thought she could hear it. I asked her if we could talk. She said of course and turned to face me with a smile. That smile made everything worse. How could she smile at me when she had been stealing from me? I asked her directly if she had taken any money from my room. Her smile faded. She looked confused. She said no, she would never do that. She asked me why I would think such a thing. I told her everything. I told her about the missing money, about seeing her in my room, about how the theft kept happening, even after I moved my hiding spot. I told her I had been tracking the serial numbers and that I knew someone in the house was taking my savings. Mom's face went pale. She said she understood why I was upset, but she promised she hadn't taken anything. She said she had only been in my room to put away laundry and that she would never steal from me. I wanted to believe her, but the evidence said otherwise. I asked her to explain why money kept disappearing every time she was home alone. She didn't have a good answer. She just kept saying she didn't do it. I could see tears forming in her eyes, but I was too angry to care. I told her I was going to start keeping my money at the bank where it would be safe from thieves. The word hung in the air between us. Thief. I had just called my mother a thief. Mom left the kitchen without another word. I heard her bedroom door close upstairs. Dad came into the kitchen a few minutes later and asked what had happened. I told him everything. He looked shocked. He said there had to be some mistake. He said Mom would never steal from anyone, especially not from her own daughter. But I could see doubt in his eyes too. He knew the money was missing. He knew Mom had been acting strange lately. He promised he would talk to her and figure out what was going on. That night, I heard my parents arguing in their bedroom. Their voices were muffled, but I could tell Dad was asking Mom questions and Mom was crying. I felt terrible, but I also felt justified. I had a right to protect my money. If Mom was going through something, she should have asked for help instead of stealing. I tried to convince myself I had done the right thing by confronting her. The next morning, Mom didn't come down for breakfast. Dad said she wasn't feeling well and was staying in bed. Emma asked what was wrong, but Dad just said Mom needed rest. I knew the truth. Mom was devastated by my accusation. Part of me felt guilty, but another part of me was still angry. If she was innocent, why couldn't she prove it? Why couldn't she explain what was happening to my money? I started keeping all my cash in my backpack. I took it with me everywhere I went. No more money went missing after that. To me, that was final proof. Mom had been the one stealing. Now that I was keeping my money with me, she couldn't get to it anymore. The theft had stopped because I had removed the opportunity. I felt vindicated, but also heartbroken. How could my own mother do this to me? The atmosphere at home became unbearable. Mom barely spoke to me. When she did, her voice was cold and distant. She stopped asking about my day or reminding me to do my homework. It was like she had built a wall between us. Dad tried to play peacemaker, but it was awkward and forced. Emma noticed something was wrong but didn't know what. She kept asking me why Mom was acting weird, but I didn't want to tell her. I didn't want Emma to know that our mother was a thief. Weeks went by. I kept my money close and stayed out of the house as much as possible. I picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop. I spent time at Jessica's house. Anything to avoid the tension at home. Mom looked sadder every day. She lost weight. The sparkle in her eyes was gone. Dad seemed lost and didn't know how to fix things. Emma became even more difficult because she could sense something was wrong with the family. One Friday evening in April, about a month after I had confronted Mom, something unexpected happened. Emma came into my room crying. She closed the door behind her and sat on my bed. She was shaking. I asked her what was wrong. She took a deep breath and said she needed to tell me something. My stomach dropped. I knew from the look on her face that it was serious. Emma confessed that she had been the one taking my money. Not Mom. Emma had been stealing from me for months. She said she was sorry, but that she had been desperate. She had gotten involved with a group of kids at school who pressured her to have nice things. She felt left out and poor compared to them. She started taking small amounts of cash from me to buy clothes and makeup. She thought I wouldn't notice if she only took a little at a time. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emma explained that she knew where I hid my lockbox because she had seen me checking it one day. She had watched me lock my door and figured out that I was keeping money under my bed. She started sneaking into my room when I was at work. She said it was easy because I would tell everyone when I would be gone. She admitted she had also been taking money from my purse when I left it lying around the house. I asked her about the day I came home early and saw Mom in the hallway. Emma said that day she had been in my room taking money when she heard me come in the front door. She panicked and hid in my closet. Mom had actually come upstairs to call Emma for a snack. When Mom saw my door open and nobody inside, she got worried and went in to check. That's when I arrived home and saw Mom. Emma had waited in the closet until we left the hallway, then snuck out of my room and pretended she had been in her own room the whole time. Emma said she felt terrible about what happened. She said she never meant for me to blame Mom. When I confronted Mom about the stealing, Emma realized how serious things had gotten. But she was too scared to come forward. She watched our family fall apart because of her lies. She saw Mom crying every day. She saw me avoiding everyone. She saw Dad stressed and confused. The guilt had been eating her alive, and she finally couldn't take it anymore. I sat there stunned. I had spent weeks believing my mother was a thief. I had accused her, hurt her, and destroyed our relationship, all because of Emma. I felt anger rising in my chest. I wanted to scream at my sister for what she had done. But looking at her tear-stained face, I could see she was just a confused kid who made terrible choices. She hadn't meant for things to spiral this far out of control. Emma begged me not to tell Mom and Dad. She said she would pay me back every penny. She said she would get a job and work to earn the money. She promised she would never steal again. But I knew I couldn't keep this secret. Mom deserved to know the truth. She had been suffering for a month because of my false accusation. She needed to know she was innocent. Now this is where I did confront Emma and tell her we had to tell our parents the truth immediately, that I want you to advise me if I was right or wrong. I told Emma that we were going downstairs right now to tell Mom and Dad everything. She started crying harder and begging me not to. She said she would be grounded forever. She said Mom and Dad would hate her. She said her life would be ruined. I felt sorry for her, but I knew this was bigger than her punishment. This was about justice for Mom. This was about fixing the terrible mistake I had made. We went downstairs together. Mom was in the living room reading a book. Dad was in his office. I called Dad out and asked them both to sit down because Emma had something important to say. Mom looked at me with those sad, distant eyes. It broke my heart to see what I had done to her. Emma stood there shaking, unable to speak. So I spoke for her. I told our parents that Emma had been stealing my money, not Mom. I explained everything Emma had told me. The room went silent. Mom's book fell from her hands onto the floor. Dad's mouth hung open. They both looked at Emma, who was sobbing and nodding. Mom asked Emma if it was true. Emma whispered, "Yes." Mom's face went through so many emotions: shock, hurt, anger, and then something that looked like relief. She wasn't a thief. She had been innocent all along. But the pain I had caused her was still written all over her face. Dad started questioning Emma about why she did it and how long it had been going on. Emma confessed to everything through her tears. She told them about the pressure from kids at school. She told them about feeling poor and left out. She told them she was sorry and that she knew she had made a horrible mistake. Dad looked furious. He told Emma to go to her room immediately. Emma ran upstairs crying. We could hear her door slam. Then Mom turned to me. I expected her to yell at me. I expected her to tell me how much I had hurt her. But instead, she just sat there looking at me with the saddest expression I had ever seen. I started crying and apologizing. I told her I was so sorry for accusing her. I told her I should have trusted her. I told her I should have investigated more before jumping to conclusions. I said I would do anything to make it right. Mom was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke in a voice I barely recognized. She said she understood why I had suspected her. She said the evidence did look bad. But what hurt her most was that I had been willing to believe she could do something like that. She had spent my entire life showing me love and putting me first, and I had thrown all of that away the moment things looked suspicious. She said trust was the foundation of family, and I had shattered it. Dad tried to defend me. He said I was young and made a mistake. He said we could all move forward and heal from this, but Mom shook her head. She said it wasn't that simple. She said she didn't know if she could forgive me right away. She needed time to process everything. She got up and went to her bedroom. I sat on the couch crying while Dad held me. He said everything would be okay eventually, but his voice didn't sound convinced. The next few days were awful. Emma was grounded for 3 months. She had to give up her phone and computer. She couldn't hang out with friends. She had to get a part-time job to pay me back the money she stole. Mom and Dad made it clear that stealing was serious and there would be real consequences. Emma accepted her punishment without complaint. She knew she deserved it, but my relationship with Mom was different now. She was polite to me but distant. She didn't hug me goodnight anymore. She didn't ask about my life. She did her motherly duties like making meals and doing laundry, but the warmth was gone. It felt like living with a stranger who looked like my mom. I tried to apologize over and over, but she would just nod and walk away. The wall between us grew higher every day. I talked to Dad about it. He said Mom was hurt deeply and needed time. He said I had questioned her character and integrity. I had made her feel like a criminal in her own home. He said, those wounds don't heal quickly. He told me to be patient and keep showing Mom that I loved her and trusted her. But weeks turned into months, and things didn't get better. Summer came, and the tension at home was still thick. Emma had paid back most of the money she stole. She seemed genuinely sorry and had changed her behavior. She stopped caring so much about what other kids at school thought. She focused on her job and rebuilding trust with our parents. Ironically, Emma and I got closer during this time. We both felt terrible about what had happened, and we bonded over trying to fix things. But Mom remained distant from me. She and Dad started having problems too. I would hear them arguing late at night. Dad would say that she needed to forgive me and move on. Mom would say that it wasn't about forgiveness, but about broken trust. She said she didn't know how to look at me the same way anymore. Their arguments scared me. I had never heard them fight like this before. In August, something happened that made everything worse. Dad's sister, my Aunt Carol, was getting remarried. She lived in California and was planning a big wedding at a beach resort. She invited our whole family. Mom was excited about the trip. It was the first time I had seen her genuinely happy in months. She talked about getting a new dress and spending time by the ocean. She and Aunt Carol had always been close. This wedding was a big deal for her. The week before we were supposed to leave for California, I made another terrible mistake. I was cleaning my room and found an old envelope stuffed in a drawer. Inside was $300 that I had completely forgotten about. It was birthday money from my grandparents from 2 years ago that I had stashed away and never deposited at the bank. My heart sank. This was money I hadn't counted in my lockbox. This was money I didn't include in my notebook records. I realized with horror that some of the money I thought had been stolen might have never existed in my lockbox in the first place. I had been so sure of my counts, but I had forgotten about this hidden envelope. Maybe I hadn't been tracking my money as carefully as I thought. Maybe some of what I blamed on Emma and Mom was actually just my own bad record keeping. I felt sick. I had destroyed my relationship with Mom over money that might not have even been stolen. I should have kept this information to myself. I should have just been grateful that I found extra money. But guilt overwhelmed me. I felt like I owed Mom complete honesty after everything I had put her through. So I went to her and told her about finding the forgotten money. I explained that maybe my counts had been wrong. I said maybe not all the money that went missing was actually stolen. I thought this would help. I thought this would show her I was trying to be honest and fair. But Mom's face went white. She asked me what I was saying. I explained again about the envelope and how my records might have been off. She cut me off. She asked me if I was saying that I had accused her of stealing money that might not have even been taken. I stammered that I didn't know for sure, but it was possible some of my counts were wrong. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears this time, angry tears. She said she couldn't believe what she was hearing. She said I had already ruined months of her life by accusing her of being a thief. Now I was telling her that I might have been wrong about the amount of money even before we found out about Emma. She said my carelessness with tracking my own money had led to false accusations that broke her heart. She said she needed space from me. She said she was going to California for the wedding alone. She didn't want me to come. I was devastated. I begged her to let me come to the wedding. I said I wanted to make things right. I said I would do anything. But Mom was firm. She said she needed this trip to be peaceful and happy. She said my presence would just remind her of the pain I had caused. Dad tried to convince her to let me come, but she refused. She said if I came, she wouldn't go. And she really wanted to be there for Aunt Carol. So it was decided. Mom would go to California alone. The night before Mom left for the wedding, I tried one more time to apologize. I wrote her a long letter explaining how sorry I was. I told her I loved her and that I understood why she was hurt. I slipped the letter under her bedroom door. I waited in my room hoping she would come talk to me, but she never did. The next morning, Dad drove her to the airport. She left without saying goodbye to me. The wedding weekend was torture. I stayed home with Emma, while Dad went to California to join Mom. He had driven her to the airport but flew out the next day to be there for the ceremony. Emma and I barely talked. We both felt horrible about what we had caused. We ordered pizza and watched movies, but nothing could distract me from the guilt and sadness I felt. Dad called on Sunday to tell us the wedding had been beautiful. He said Mom seemed relaxed and happy at the beach. He said Aunt Carol was thrilled that Mom could make it. He said maybe this trip was good for Mom and would help her heal. I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe when she came home things would be better. Maybe the space had given her perspective and she would be ready to forgive me. But when Mom came home on Monday evening, something was wrong. She wasn't relaxed and happy anymore. She looked stressed and upset. Dad looked worried. I asked what happened. Dad said they would talk to us later. Emma and I exchanged nervous glances. Something bad had happened in California. That night, Mom and Dad sat us down in the living room. Mom's eyes were red from crying. Dad looked exhausted. Mom said she needed to tell us something. She said that at the wedding she had met someone. His name was Richard, and he was a friend of Aunt Carol's new husband. Richard was kind and funny. He made Mom laugh for the first time in months. They spent a lot of time talking at the wedding reception. Mom said she realized during that weekend how unhappy she had been at home. She said the situation with me had made her see that she had lost herself in being a mother and a wife. She said she needed to focus on her own happiness for once. Then she said the words that shattered my world. She said she wanted a divorce from Dad. She said she was going to move to California to be closer to Aunt Carol and to explore her relationship with Richard. I couldn't breathe. Emma started crying. Dad just sat there looking broken. I asked Mom how she could do this. I asked her if this was because of me. She said it wasn't just about me, but that my accusation had been a turning point. It made her realize how little trust and respect existed in our family. She said she couldn't stay in a home where she felt like a suspect instead of a mother. I begged her not to leave. I said I would do anything to make things right. I said we could go to family therapy. I said I would spend the rest of my life making it up to her. But Mom's mind was made up. She said she had already talked to a lawyer. She said she would be moving out at the end of the month. She said we could visit her in California, but she was done living in Oregon. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Mom packed her things while Dad tried to keep Emma and me from falling apart. Our house felt like a funeral home. Friends and family heard about the divorce and started asking questions. I had to explain to people that my parents were splitting up. I couldn't tell them it was partly my fault. I couldn't admit that my false accusation had triggered this whole disaster. Grandma was especially upset. She was Dad's mom, and she blamed Mom for abandoning her family. Grandma said Mom was being selfish and irresponsible. When Grandma found out about Richard, she was furious. She called Mom terrible names and said she was having an affair. Mom tried to explain that nothing physical had happened with Richard until after she decided to leave Dad, but Grandma didn't believe her. Grandma told Mom she was a disgrace. Dad's whole family turned against Mom. They saw her as the villain who destroyed our family. They didn't know the full story. They didn't know about my accusation or how much pain Mom had been in for months, but I was too ashamed to tell them the truth. I let them blame Mom because it was easier than admitting my role in everything. Emma stayed quiet too. We both felt like cowards. Mom moved to California in September. She rented a small apartment near Aunt Carol. She got a job at a hospital in San Diego. She started dating Richard officially. Dad filed for divorce, and the legal process began. It was messy and painful. They had to divide their assets and figure out custody arrangements for Emma, who was still a minor. I was 18 by then, so I could choose where I lived. I stayed in Oregon with Dad. The divorce was finalized by December. It happened faster than anyone expected because Mom and Dad just wanted it over. There was no big fight over money or possessions. They both just wanted to move on with their lives. Mom got remarried to Richard the following spring. It was a small ceremony in California. She invited Emma and me, but neither of us went. We were too hurt and angry. Dad certainly wasn't invited. Aunt Carol stopped talking to Dad's side of the family completely. She took Mom's side and supported her new marriage. This created a huge rift in the extended family. Holidays became awkward. Some relatives stayed loyal to Dad, while others stayed in touch with Mom. Family gatherings were split. There was no more big Thanksgiving dinner with everyone together. Christmas felt empty and sad. Emma took the divorce really hard. She started seeing a therapist to deal with her guilt and sadness. She felt responsible because her stealing had started the chain of events. Her therapist helped her understand that while her actions were wrong, she wasn't responsible for Mom and Dad's marriage falling apart. But Emma still struggled. She had nightmares and anxiety. Her grades dropped. She stopped hanging out with friends. I was drowning in guilt. I couldn't eat or sleep properly. I dropped out of community college because I couldn't focus on my classes. I quit my job at the coffee shop because I kept breaking down crying during shifts. Dad was worried about me. He made me see a therapist too. My therapist said I was experiencing depression and anxiety related to trauma and guilt. She prescribed medication and recommended intensive therapy. Therapy helped me understand some things. My therapist explained that I had made a serious mistake by accusing Mom without solid proof. She said I should have investigated more and talked to Mom more carefully before making such a serious accusation. But she also said that Mom's decision to leave Dad and marry Richard was her own choice. Mom was an adult who made her own decisions about her marriage and her happiness. I couldn't control that. But understanding that intellectually didn't make me feel better emotionally. I still felt like I had destroyed my family. I still believed that if I had just been more careful with my money, or if I had trusted Mom more, or if I had found out the truth about Emma sooner, none of this would have happened. The guilt was crushing me. I felt like I didn't deserve to be happy. Years passed. I eventually got better with therapy and medication. I finished community college and got a job as a medical assistant. I met a guy named Tom, and we got married when I was 23. We had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I tried to build a good life for myself despite the broken pieces of my past, but the damage to my family never fully healed. Mom stayed in California with Richard. They seemed happy together. She called Emma and me sometimes, but our conversations were stiff and uncomfortable. There was too much history between us, too much pain. I visited her a few times over the years, but it never felt natural. She felt more like a distant aunt than my mother. The closeness we used to have was gone forever. Dad never remarried. He dated a few women, but nothing serious. He poured himself into his work and into being there for Emma and me. He was a great grandfather to my kids and to Emma's kids when she eventually had them, but I could see the sadness in his eyes sometimes. He had lost the love of his life, and he never really moved on. Emma struggled for a long time, too. She eventually got through high school and went to college. She became a social worker helping troubled teens. She said her own mistakes and experiences motivated her to help kids who were going through difficult times. She got married and had a daughter, but like me, she carried guilt about what happened to our family. We talked about it sometimes late at night when we got together. We both wondered if things could have been different. The worst part was how the divorce affected the extended family. My kids grew up barely knowing their cousins on Mom's side because of the family split. Aunt Carol's kids were close with Mom but distant from us. Holiday gatherings were small and sad compared to the big family celebrations we used to have. My kids would ask why we didn't see certain relatives anymore, and I didn't know how to explain it to them. Grandma passed away 5 years ago. Mom came to the funeral, but it was awkward and tense. She brought Richard, which upset Dad's siblings. There were whispered arguments and cold shoulders. Mom cried during the service, but I didn't know if her tears were for Grandma or for everything that had been lost. I wanted to talk to her, to finally have a real conversation about everything, but the moment never felt right. She left right after the service. I didn't even get to say goodbye. Last year, I found out through Aunt Carol's Facebook that Mom is planning a big family reunion in California this summer. She's inviting all her siblings and their kids. Emma got an invitation. I did too, but the invitation felt hollow. How could we have a family reunion when our family was so fractured? How could we pretend everything was normal when nothing had been normal for years? I haven't responded to the invitation yet. I don't know if I will go. My kids are older now. They're teenagers. They've asked me about why our family is so broken. Why don't they see Grandma Mom more? Why don't they know their California cousins? I've tried to explain it in ways they could understand without revealing my role in everything. But they're smart. They sense there's more to the story. I'm afraid that one day they'll find out the truth about what I did. I'm afraid they'll be ashamed of me. Tom knows the whole story. I told him everything before we got married. He said everyone makes mistakes and that I was young. He said I've punished myself enough and that I need to forgive myself. But how can I forgive myself when my family is still broken? How can I move on when the consequences of my actions are still playing out every single day? Looking back, I can see so many moments where I could have made different choices. I could have talked to Emma more before accusing Mom. I could have asked Mom to help me figure out who was taking my money instead of assuming it was her. I could have given her the benefit of the doubt based on years of her being a loving, trustworthy mother. I could have been more careful with tracking my money in the first place. Any of those different choices might have prevented the catastrophe that followed. But I didn't make those choices. I jumped to conclusions. I let suspicion override trust. I accused my mother of being a thief without solid proof. And that false accusation set off a chain reaction that destroyed my family. Mom's trust in me was broken. Her trust in our family was broken. She realized she was unhappy and decided to leave. Dad lost his wife. Emma and I lost the close relationship we had with Mom. The extended family fractured. My kids grew up without knowing half their relatives. All because I couldn't keep track of my money and couldn't trust my own mother. I think about that moment in the kitchen when I called Mom a thief. I can still see her face. The shock, the hurt, the betrayal. If I could go back and undo that moment, I would. I would take back those words. I would investigate more carefully. I would trust her. But I can't go back. I can only live with the consequences of what I did. And those consequences have been devastating. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if none of this had happened. Would Mom and Dad still be together? Would we still have big family holidays with everyone laughing and happy? Would my kids know their cousins and feel part of a big, loving family? Would I have a close relationship with my mother instead of this distant, painful connection? The alternate version of my life haunts me. It's a life where I made better choices. A life where I didn't destroy everything. Emma and I talk about going to the California reunion together. Maybe it's time to face everything head on. Maybe it's time to have honest conversations with Mom about what happened all those years ago. Maybe it's time to try to rebuild something from the broken pieces. But I'm terrified. What if Mom still resents me? What if she can never truly forgive me? What if trying to fix things just makes everything worse? What if opening old wounds causes more pain for everyone involved? I called Mom last week to talk about the reunion. It was the first real conversation we'd had in months. Her voice sounded older, tired. I asked her if she really wanted me to come. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she said yes. She wanted both Emma and me there. She said it was time to try to move forward as a family. She said Richard wanted to meet my kids properly. She said Aunt Carol's grandchildren would be there, and it would be nice for all the cousins to finally spend time together. But then her voice changed. It got harder, colder. She said that coming to the reunion meant we all had to agree to leave the past in the past. She said she didn't want to rehash old arguments or accusations. She said if we came, we had to come with open hearts and a willingness to focus on the present and future, not the past. I agreed, but inside I felt hollow. How could we move forward without ever really addressing what happened? How could we pretend the past didn't matter when it shaped everything about our present? After I hung up, I sat in my car crying for 20 minutes. Tom found me there when he came home from work. He held me while I sobbed. He said I needed to decide what was best for my mental health. He said if going to California would help me heal, then I should go. But if it would just reopen wounds without any real resolution, maybe I should skip it. He said he would support whatever I decided. I told him I didn't know what to do. I talked to my therapist about it in our next session. She asked me what I hoped to gain from going to the reunion. I said I hoped to reconnect with Mom. I hoped to show her I was sorry and that I had grown as a person. I hoped my kids could know their grandmother better. I hoped maybe we could start to heal the family. My therapist asked if those hopes were realistic, based on what Mom had said about not discussing the past. I didn't have a good answer. My therapist helped me see that I was still carrying enormous guilt, and that I was hoping the reunion would somehow absolve me of that guilt. She said I needed to find peace with what happened, whether or not Mom ever fully forgave me. She said I needed to forgive myself, which was something I had been resisting for years. She said holding on to guilt forever wasn't noble or helpful. It was just self-punishment that kept me stuck and prevented me from being fully present with my own husband and children. That session changed something in me. I realized I had been defining myself by my mistake for over a decade. I was Sarah who destroyed her family, Sarah who falsely accused her mother, Sarah who caused a divorce. But I was also other things. I was a good medical assistant who helped patients every day. I was a loving wife and mother. I was a person who had learned from her mistakes and tried to do better. I was more than just my worst moment. I decided to go to the reunion, not because I thought it would fix everything or erase my guilt, but because I wanted to try. I wanted my kids to know their extended family. I wanted to see Mom and show her that I had become a better person. I wanted to support Emma, who was also nervous about going. And I wanted to stop running from my past and face it with honesty and courage. Emma and I booked our flights for the same day. We decided to stay at a hotel near the beach where the reunion would be held, instead of staying with Mom and Richard. We needed our own space to decompress and process everything. Tom took time off work to come with me and help with the kids. Emma's husband and daughter were coming too. It would be the first time both of our families had been to California together. The weeks leading up to the trip were filled with anxiety. I had nightmares about the reunion going badly. I imagined Mom yelling at me in front of everyone. I imagined the extended family taking sides and arguing. I imagined my kids witnessing family drama and being traumatized by it. Tom kept reassuring me that it would be okay, but I could see he was worried too. He had only met Mom twice, both times very briefly. This would be his first real time spending time with her. We flew to California on a Thursday morning. The reunion was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. That gave us Friday to adjust and prepare. When we landed in San Diego, the warm sun felt good on my face. Oregon had been rainy and gray when we left. California felt bright and hopeful. Maybe that was a good sign. Maybe this trip would bring some light into our family's darkness. Friday morning, Mom texted me asking if we could meet for lunch. Just her and Emma and me. No husbands, no kids, just the three of us. My heart raced when I read the message. This was the conversation I had been dreading and hoping for at the same time. Emma texted me asking if I was going to go. I said yes. She said she would go too, but she was scared. I told her I was scared too, but we would face it together. We met Mom at a small cafe near the beach. She was already there when Emma and I arrived. She looked older than I remembered. Her hair had more gray in it. She had wrinkles around her eyes, but she was still beautiful. She still had that presence that made her seem strong and capable. When she saw us, she stood up and smiled. It was a careful smile, guarded. She hugged Emma first, then me. The hug felt stiff and formal, not like the warm, tight hugs she used to give us when we were younger. We sat down and ordered food. Small talk filled the first few minutes. Mom asked about the flight and the hotel. We asked about her job at the hospital. She told us about Richard's work as an engineer. Everything felt polite and surface level. I could feel the tension building. There was so much that needed to be said, but none of us knew how to start. Finally, Mom took a deep breath and said she wanted to talk about what happened all those years ago. My stomach dropped. She had said on the phone that we wouldn't discuss the past, but here she was bringing it up. She said she had been thinking about everything a lot lately. She said she realized that trying to move forward without addressing the past wasn't realistic. She said we needed to have this conversation if there was any hope of truly healing. Mom looked at me with eyes that were both sad and clear. She said she had been angry with me for a very long time, angry that I accused her of stealing, angry that I didn't trust her after years of her being a good mother, angry that my accusation made her question her entire life and marriage. She said that anger had eaten away at her for years, but she had been working with a therapist too, and she had come to understand some things. She said she understood that I was young when it happened. She said she understood that the evidence did look bad from my perspective. She said she understood that teenagers don't always make the best decisions, and that I hadn't meant to hurt her so deeply. She said she had taken responsibility for her own role in what happened. She admitted that she had been unhappy in her marriage to Dad for a while before my accusation. She said the incident with me had just been the catalyst that forced her to face her unhappiness. Mom said she wanted me to know that she didn't blame me entirely for the divorce. She said her decision to leave Dad and marry Richard was her own choice, based on her own needs and desires. She said she had tried to tell herself for years that it was all my fault because that was easier than accepting her own responsibility for ending her marriage. But she knew now that wasn't fair to me. She said, I had made a mistake, but I didn't force her to get divorced. She did that herself. Then she looked at Emma. She said she forgave Emma for stealing the money. She said Emma had been a child dealing with peer pressure and insecurity. She said Emma had confessed and faced consequences and had grown into a wonderful, responsible adult. She said she was proud of the woman Emma had become and the work she did helping troubled teens. Emma started crying. Mom reached across the table and held her hand. But when Mom looked back at me, her expression was different. She said forgiving me was harder, not because what I did was worse than what Emma did, but because my accusation had cut deeper. It had made her feel like all her years of love and sacrifice meant nothing. It had made her feel like her own daughter saw her as capable of betrayal and theft. She said that kind of hurt doesn't heal easily. She said she had worked hard to forgive me, and she mostly had. But there was still a scar. She said scars don't go away. They just become part of who you are. I was crying now, too. I told Mom I was so sorry. I told her I had spent every day since then regretting what I did. I told her I understood if she could never fully forgive me. I told her I didn't expect her to forget or pretend it didn't happen. I just hoped we could find a way to have some kind of relationship going forward. I told her I wanted my kids to know her. I told her I wanted to be part of her life, even if it was in a smaller way than before. Mom nodded. She said she wanted that too. She said that's why she had planned this reunion. She said she was tired of the family being fractured. She said life was too short to hold grudges forever. She said she wanted to try to build something new with us. Not the same relationship we had before, because that was gone, but maybe something different that could still be meaningful. She said it would take time and effort from all of us. She said there would be uncomfortable moments and hard conversations, but she was willing to try if we were. Emma and I both said yes, we wanted to try. We sat there at that cafe for 2 more hours talking, really talking, not just about the past, but about the present and future. Mom told us about her life with Richard. She said he made her happy in ways she hadn't been happy in years. She said he encouraged her to pursue her own hobbies and dreams instead of just taking care of everyone else. She said she had started painting again, something she loved as a young woman but had given up when she became a mother. We told her about our lives. Emma talked about her work and her daughter. I talked about my job and my kids. We showed her pictures on our phones. She smiled at the photos of her grandchildren. She said she had missed so much of their lives and she regretted that. She said she hoped we could all spend more time together going forward. Maybe regular video calls, maybe annual trips to California. Maybe sometimes she could come visit us in Oregon. When we finally left the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in years. The conversation hadn't fixed everything. There was still pain and distance between us, but it was a start. It was honest and real. It was more than we had had in over a decade. As Emma and I walked back to our cars, we hugged each other tightly. She said she was glad we came. I said I was too. The reunion on Saturday was actually nice. It was awkward at times, especially when people who hadn't seen each other in years tried to make conversation. But there was also laughter and good food and kids playing on the beach. My children got to meet their California cousins for the first time. They ran around together like kids do, not caring about adult drama and family history. Watching them play together made me sad for all the years they had missed, but also hopeful that maybe their generation could have a better relationship than ours had. Richard was kind to me. He shook my hand and said he had heard a lot about me. I didn't know what that meant, but I appreciated that he seemed to be trying. He played with my kids and talked to Tom about sports and work. He seemed like a genuinely good guy. I could see why Mom was happy with him. He treated her with respect and affection. I could see them holding hands and laughing together. It made me think about Mom and Dad and how I never remembered seeing them hold hands or laugh like that. Aunt Carol was warm and welcoming. She hugged me tight and said she was glad we had all come together. She said Mom had been nervous about the reunion but was so happy we were there. Aunt Carol didn't mention the past or take sides. She just focused on bringing everyone together and making sure everyone had a good time. I was grateful for her efforts. She had always been good at holding the family together. Dad's side of the family wasn't at the reunion, of course. That division still existed. Grandma was gone, but Dad's siblings still didn't talk to Mom. They probably never would. That was a permanent fracture that couldn't be fixed. It made me sad to think about how many people had been hurt by everything that happened. My mistake had rippled out and affected so many lives beyond just Mom and me. On Sunday morning before we flew home, Mom came to our hotel. She brought gifts for the kids, little things she had picked up that she thought they would like. My daughter got a bracelet with California charms. My son got a book about marine life. They were thoughtful gifts, the kind a grandmother gives. The kids thanked her politely but still seemed unsure around her. They didn't really know her. She was basically a stranger to them who happened to be their grandmother. Mom asked if she could talk to my kids for a few minutes. I said yes, though I was nervous about what she might say. She sat down with them and told them she knew she hadn't been around much in their lives. She said that was something she regretted. She said families can be complicated and sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt everyone. She said she hoped to spend more time with them and get to know them better. She said they could call her whenever they wanted and she would always answer. My daughter asked Mom why she lived so far away. Mom said she had moved to California because she needed a fresh start after some difficult times. She said sometimes people need to make big changes to be happy. My son asked if she was coming to visit us in Oregon soon. Mom said she would try to come visit maybe at Christmas. She said she wanted to see their school and their friends and their house. The kids seemed satisfied with her answers. They gave her hugs before she left. After Mom drove away, my daughter asked me why we hadn't seen Grandma much when they were younger. I took a deep breath. I knew this conversation was coming eventually. I told her that Grandma and I had a big fight a long time ago before she was born. I said I had accused Grandma of something she didn't do, and it hurt her very badly. I said the fight caused a lot of problems in our family. I said it was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made. I said I was sorry it had affected her and her brother. My daughter was quiet for a moment. Then she said everyone makes mistakes. She said the important thing was that we were trying to fix it now. She said she liked Grandma and wanted to get to know her better. Her simple wisdom made me cry. Kids have a way of cutting through complicated adult emotions and seeing things clearly. She was right. Everyone makes mistakes. What mattered was what we did after the mistakes. The flight home was reflective. I looked out the window at the clouds and thought about everything that had happened. The reunion hadn't magically fixed our broken family. Mom and I weren't suddenly close again. The years of pain and distance were still there, but we had taken a step toward healing. We had been honest with each other. We had acknowledged the past and agreed to try to build a future. That was more than we'd had in over a decade. When we got back to Oregon, I called Dad to tell him about the trip. He asked how Mom was doing. I said she seemed happy. He was quiet for a moment, then said he was glad she was happy. I could hear the sadness in his voice. He still loved her after all these years. The divorce had been finalized for over a decade, but he had never moved on. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me again. Dad had lost the love of his life partly because of the chain of events my accusation had set in motion. Dad asked if Mom had asked about him. I said no. He said that was okay, he hadn't expected her to. He asked about the grandkids and if they had fun. I said yes, they had a great time meeting their cousins. He said he was happy for them. Then he changed the subject to talk about work and the weather. We didn't talk about Mom again. It was too painful for him. I understood that. Some wounds never fully heal. You just learn to live with them. Life went back to normal after California. I went back to work. The kids went back to school. Tom went back to his job. But something felt different inside me. The reunion had lifted a weight I hadn't fully realized I was carrying. I wasn't constantly consumed by guilt anymore. I still felt bad about what happened, but it wasn't crushing me every single day. I could think about the past without spiraling into depression. That was progress. Mom and I started texting more regularly. Nothing deep, just checking in. She would send pictures of things she was doing. I would send pictures of the kids. She video called on my son's birthday and sang happy birthday to him. She sent my daughter a care package with art supplies. Small gestures, but they meant something. They meant she was trying. They meant she wanted to be in our lives. That was more than I had dared to hope for. Emma and I talked about the reunion several times. She said it had helped her too. She said talking to Mom about everything had lifted some of her guilt. She said she finally felt like maybe she could stop punishing herself for stealing the money all those years ago. She said her therapist was proud of her for facing the situation head on. She said she felt closer to Mom now than she had since before everything happened. I was happy for her. She deserved to heal. But I also felt a tiny bit jealous. Mom had clearly forgiven Emma more fully than she had forgiven me. I understood why. Emma had been a confused teenager dealing with peer pressure. I had been old enough to know better. Emma's crime was stealing money. Mine was destroying trust. Those weren't equivalent. But it still stung a little to see how easily Mom hugged Emma and how careful she still was with me. I tried not to let the jealousy show. This wasn't a competition. We were both trying to heal our relationships with Mom in our own ways. Christmas came. Mom did come visit like she had promised the kids. She stayed for 4 days. It was strange having her in our house. She slept in the guest room and cooked breakfast in the mornings. It felt almost normal, but not quite. There was still that underlying tension, that awareness that things weren't what they used to be. But the kids loved having her there. They showed her their rooms and their favorite toys. They took her to their school's Christmas concert. They made gingerbread houses with her. On Christmas Eve, after the kids went to bed, Mom and I sat up talking. She told me more about her life in California. She said she volunteered at a women's shelter on weekends. She said helping other women who were going through difficult transitions made her feel purposeful. She said she wished she had found that kind of purpose earlier in her life, instead of defining herself only as a wife and mother. I said I understood. I said I was trying to make sure I didn't lose myself in my roles as wife and mother either. Mom said she could see I had grown up a lot. She said I seemed more thoughtful and careful about my words and actions. She said motherhood had matured me. I told her that wasn't the only thing that had matured me. I said making such a terrible mistake and living with the consequences for years had taught me to think before I act. I said I had learned the hard way how much damage words and accusations can do. She nodded. She said some lessons are only learned through pain. I asked Mom if she thought Dad would ever find someone else. She said she hoped he would, but doubted he would let himself. She said he was stubborn and loyal to a fault. She said she had told him years ago that she wanted him to move on and be happy, but he hadn't listened. She said she felt guilty about that sometimes. She said ending their marriage had been the right choice for her, but she hadn't wanted him to be alone forever. I said maybe someday Dad would surprise us. She smiled sadly and said maybe. Please tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong to falsely accuse my mother of theft, because this decision didn't just end her honeymoon early. It cost her the husband she loved, turned our parents against me, and left our family so fractured that my own children haven't spoken to their cousins in 2 years. And I'm sure she won't be inviting me to her next family reunion this year.